Right now, though, let's bring in the legal analyst in front of the program, Randy Zellen, to talk about all of this. Randy, good to see you. We're going to get into this story. Before I ask you a question, though, I want our viewers now at the top of the hour, because President Biden was just asked about this story in Mexico City. He said he was surprised about this. Let's just hear what he had to say. He was asked by a reporter with the Associated Press there just moments ago.
Mr. President, you've been accused of being too soft on border security and now too hard following the recent border policy changes. What's the right balance? And on the news at home, can you explain how classified documents ended up in one of your offices, and should the public have been notified sooner? For Prime Minister Trudeau, there's been a suggestion that Canada lead a multinational security force in Haiti. I wondered if that was a possibility and what you would need. Y señor usted presidente, muchas gracias por la bienvenida esta semana. Quiero preguntar, you said you would accept, you would be willing to accept more migrants arriving to the U.S.-Mexico border. What do you want from the U.S. in return?
Answer first? Well, let me get rid of the easy one first. People know I take classified documents and classified information seriously. When my lawyers were clearing out my office at the University of Pennsylvania, they set up an office for me, secure office in the Capitol. When the 4 years after being vice president, I was a professor at Penn. They found some documents in a box in a locked cabinet, or at least a closet. And as soon as they did, they realized there were several classified documents in that box. And they did what they should have done. They immediately called the archives, turned them over to the archives, and I was briefed about this discovery and surprised to learn that there were any government records that were taken there to that office. But I don't know what's in the documents. My lawyers have not suggested I ask what documents they were. I've turned over the boxes. They've turned over the boxes to the archives, and we're cooperating fully with the review, and which I hope will be finished soon, and there'll be more detail at that time.
Okay, Randy, those were the most extensive and first comments we've gotten from President Biden about this story. CNN is reporting a total of 10 classified documents were found, dated from 2013 to 2016, covering topics like Iran, Ukraine, and the UK, reportedly found at the Penn Biden Center. My question, and I'm kind of making this in jest here, but does anyone know how to handle classified documents? This is what President Biden said back in August on the South Lawn of the White House, Randy, during the kind of immediate fallout after the FBI raid at Mar-a-Lago. He was asked, is it ever appropriate for a president to classify top secret documents? He responded, depends on the circumstance. For example, I have in my home off base that is completely secure. I take it home with me today. Today's PDB, Presidential Daily Briefing, is what I am, a person with me, military with me. I read it, I lock it up, and I give it to the military. And then the next question was followed up with, if it's not without a specialized area, classified documents are never appropriate, question mark, to which the president said it depends on the document, it depends on how secure. How different is this from what's going on with former President Trump?
Well, I think the knee-jerk reaction is it's apples and bricks, but I think the bigger issue is, and it seems to be, that if I were advising President Biden, I would say, bring it. Bring all the U.S. attorneys, bring all of the FBI agents, bring their families to investigate me, and we will show you how things are done the right way. These documents were discovered. What happened next? They were immediately turned over to the National Archives. There were no games. There were no promises. Oh, I'm going to get them to you, but then the dog ate my homework, and oh, then I ran out of gas, and then I didn't have cab fare, and oh, wait, I sent them all, but I forgot to put a stamp on the envelope. You're not, I don't think, going to hear any of that. We found these documents. They were turned over. It already sounds like that there was a wall put up between the lawyers who discovered these documents and the president. So if we take the president and his lawyers at their word, he doesn't know anything about them, doesn't know what the documents even are. So again, I think don't wish too hard. Yeah, this may make for a great soundbite, and everybody gets all excited on the Republican side. We got him. No, what you may end up seeing is the wrong way to do it versus the right way to do it.
Okay. Randy, let's talk about some of the Republican response. House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence Chairman Mike Turner from Ohio is asking for a national security, quote, damage assessment after the discovery of these documents. He sent a letter to the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, requesting that immediate review and damage assessment. We're also learning from James Comer, the new chairman of House Oversight, that he wants hearings on this. He wants answers on this. But to your point, though, and I think it's kind of plain as day, and if it's not, maybe we can offer some more clarity, that former President Trump at Mar-a-Lago was working, sometime in tandem with DOJ investigators to get all of that back from his personal residence. And he didn't give it all back in a timely manner. They had to go back and back and back until that raid by the FBI. So we all know how that played out.
Oops.
Yeah, but what is Jack Smith, who's looking into that, what is he thinking right now? There's now a U.S. attorney assigned to this with Biden. Are they going to be comparing notes?
My sense of Mr. Smith is he's got a job to do. He's going to fulfill his obligations. He's not going to get sidetracked. He's not going to buy in to the noise. There is this moral equivalency which is suddenly now taking place. Oh, aha. But when you remove the aha, the bottom line remains for both the former president and the president. It would appear that you had something that you should not have had. So let's look into it. And as I said earlier, facetiously, but now I say seriously, if in fact what President Biden has shared with us is in fact completely accurate, then if I were President Biden and his people, I would invite everybody. And in fact, I would invite the most hardline Republicans. Ask me anything you want. I would invite Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy. I would invite Rudy Giuliani. Ask me what you want. And then what you will see is, as I said earlier, these things happen, and this is how they're handled.
Yeah. Randy, let's talk about how Democrats are responding. Now, some of the Republicans you mentioned might say there's a double standard in the response amongst some high-profile Democrats. James Clyburn said to Fox, quote, "They didn't say he was holding on to them. They found them there." When asked if that poses a national security threat, Clyburn says no. When asked why not, Clyburn replied, "Because I don't think so." We also asked some people without clearance having access to classified info is not a national security concern. Clyburn replied, "I don't know." So a lot of Democrats, maybe in some estimation, are kind of waving this off. President Biden there in Mexico City, he had to respond to it in some fashion, reading from notes there. But he gave them back when the National Archives asked for them. That's the main difference, right?
Well, that's one of a number of differences, but certainly that's a critical one. And the other, the dovetail to that is we found them and we reached out, as opposed to the opposite. And then, yes, the stories or the everything diverges because in the Biden camp you have, we found them, we called, we delivered them. The Trump camp you have, we got a phone call, yeah, we'll get them to you, yeah, we'll get them to you, yeah, we'll get them to you. And they were only gotten because of a search warrant. I do think that where the Biden camp will have to maybe taken to the watershed just a wee bit is, yes, the timing does seem a little bit curious that, okay, you may have let the National Archives know right away, but kind of odd that you didn't disclose it to the rest of us at the same time. And perhaps was that because of the midterms? Not that there's any necessarily a legal obligation to disclose to the public. The legal obligation is disclosed to the National Archives and to the government. But yes, it certainly does make for an interesting soundbite, and certainly will give former President Trump the opportunity to divert and deflect by pointing the finger as he does so well. But that's where it comes down to. You gotta just filter out the noise and get to brass tacks, which is, did somebody do something wrong?
Yeah. Maybe the people who represent us, federal elected officials, maybe they just all need to get in a room for a refresher course on how to handle classified documents. Randy, while I have you, I want to just briefly mention a story you and I have talked about before. LiveNOW, look there outside the Fox News World headquarters. Our story takes us to New York. We got the news earlier today, Randy, that Alan Weisselberg, the former Trump CFO, was sentenced today. One of Donald Trump's most loyal lieutenants, 5 months at Rikers, Randy, for his role in that tax fraud scheme that led to the conviction of the Trump Organization last year. A state court judge handing down the sentence after Weisselberg, 75, testified as the prosecution's star witness at the trial of the company. And so he had been facing years in prison, but under a plea deal, he agreed to testify truthfully in exchange for a punishment that would, with good behavior, Randy, might last no more than 100 days. So what do you make of the Weisselberg sentence today? That was something you and I had followed quite closely here.
Well, certainly it would appear that the prosecution, the Manhattan District Attorney, was satisfied with Mr. Weisselberg's cooperation. Because if the prosecution was not satisfied, then Mr. Weisselberg would have been looking at exponentially a longer sentence. I think, reading the tea leaves, if in fact he had an agreement with the Manhattan District Attorney that if you testify in the manner in which we expect you to, and you are truthful in that testimony, that your sentence will look very, very different than it otherwise would. Well, to the extent that that cooperation implicates the Trump Organization, which clearly it did because it was convicted, and could implicate individuals at the Trump Organization, I think that the sentence bodes well for Mr. Weisselberg, but may not bode so well for individuals in the upper echelons of the Trump Organization.
So at the sentencing today, Randy, Alvin Bragg was there, the Manhattan DA. We also heard from Weisselberg's attorney saying, obviously, is a difficult day for him. Weisselberg came to court today ready to begin his sentence, and he is grateful that it has now begun. He says he deeply regrets the lapse in judgment that resulted in his conviction, and regrets at most because of the pain it caused his loving wife, his sons, and wonderful grandchildren. Weisselberg thanks them for their love and support and looks forward to reuniting with them in April as he has served his sentence. You kind of alluded to this, Randy. Last question. What do you think former President Trump and his children, Don Jr., Ivanka, Eric, what are they thinking about all of this? Do you think Weisselberg will be invited to the next Trump Christmas?
Well, certainly publicly, the Trump family position will be, see, he did something wrong, and he is going to jail. And that's my alarm to remind me to have said that. So, yes, publicly, the man got what he deserved. He's going to jail. He did wrong. Privately, I would certainly be concerned that it would appear, as I just said, that the district attorney's office was satisfied with his cooperation, found his cooperation to be useful, and perhaps over and above merely convicting the organization, because we're all waiting with bated breath as to what's going to happen in the Trump orbit with regard to these criminal investigations, one of which is right out of the Manhattan DA's office.
Yeah. Randy, thanks so much. I know that was a lot of ground that we covered, but wanted to get you on to talk about those stories that are happening as we speak, and we appreciate it. We'll talk again, Randy. Thanks.
Always a privilege to be on with you. Thank you.